What's the delay with YouTube?
It's something like 15 seconds.
Oh, okay. So I'll try not to look at that. All right. Welcome to the people in the room. Welcome to the people joining on YouTube. The goal for today is to do a kind of crash course with AI. And so at least from the people in the room, I know that some of you have used Firefly. How about others? Midjourney. So some of this may be, I was assuming that some of this might be for people who've never opened any of this. So you might already be familiar with some of it. The reason why I want to do this and why it was a little bit last minute is that I talked to a couple students and they said that they weren't using AI in their classes because they thought it was cheating. And I wanted to quickly dispel that rumor because I think it's a super valuable tool to be using, and wanted to just give a kind of introduction and talk about maybe the way that we've been using some of this, and to do a little bit of hands-on related to some of it. So I have a few slides and I can introduce a couple of things related to that. So I'll go to the slides. You guys can see that, but I can minimize that. So some of the work that I'll show and some of the stuff that I've taught has also been in collaboration with Professor Coherent. And we've been using these tools and thinking about these and integrating them into the design process. Yes. I just buried all of those. That work? Yeah. Okay. So we will get these things figured out. All right. So at least to go back for YouTube, title slide, in terms of what we're talking about today. A couple of places, if anyone is interested in seeing more on this, every day I've been posting, I think for 470 days now, through an account called Robot Historian. All of the images are produced with Midjourney, and there's a long kind of fictional narrative that is exploring this place in the future and deals with AI and automation and ecology and archiving and other types of things. And then also through my own account, I've been posting a lot of AI experiments there. And so they're different experiments, but different things in terms of text to image generation. And so if you're interested, you could follow those. So there's a couple of things, and I've done some lectures and other things recently at LTU, and we've taught last spring break. Sarah and I led a group in Rome, and we had students do a sketchbook, and I'll show a couple of examples of that using Midjourney. We ran a course this summer about storytelling, and a couple of things that we kind of take away from that are these three things on the screen. So one is that as architects and designers, it used to take us years to get to the point where we could articulate a visualization or representation of something that we are doing. All of you in the room, and maybe the group that's joining on YouTube, are early adopters related to this. Some of you are even in your first semester at LTU. This tool changes the way that we're even going to have to think about education. And so you're right, you're at a super interesting point where these technologies are forcing us to rethink some of what we've done, right? It used to be semesters and semesters of drawing, and probably semesters and semesters of frustration on all of your part because you had a design in your head, but you couldn't articulate it for someone else to understand. Now, with these tools, you can get very, very refined output very quickly. The other thing too is that those maybe as a beginning design student, lacking those skills meant that you may have had problems in terms of designing, in terms of making things. Now we can imagine things pretty quickly with a high degree of fidelity. And I'll show you some examples for that. The other thing that we talked about, the third one, which is an important one for me, is that effort is still a big part of this. And while you'll be able to make really incredible images quickly, if you just accept the first thing that you get out of AI, it's not going to be as good as if you start crafting that and thinking about that and working through it. And so I want to show a couple of examples. I want to show ChatGPT and a way that we've used that. I'll show Photoshop, which is actually even just changing, having used Photoshop for many, 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 many years, is changing the way that I even use Photoshop, and then show Midjourney as well. So, but this is an iterative issue. So just like you're being taught at very early stage, doing something once, you get a kind of initial sense, but being able to do something multiple times means the quality gets better. With AI, you're also going to be able to do many, many iterations that much faster as well. And so it can speed up your process, and hopefully all of this is hopefully in service of leading to better work. So this example is one of just starting with a prompt on the left-hand side, and at least this is Midjourney. For those who haven't used it, you can type in a prompt. You'll get 4 images. You can choose to select one of those images and make 4 more images, or upscale one of those images. And then I'll show you of tweaking that and working on it. So if you want to use AI just because you want to do something super fast and super easy and super quick, sure, you can do that. But what we can see on the screen is just that process of refinement about being able to look at something, look at variations, pick one, make more variations, tweak it, make some other variations, and then end up with an image that's on the right. So that one image on the right is probably number 50 or 60 out of all of those. But this can be done incredibly quickly as well. The pace that this software, this tool is changing is incredibly fast. So with Midjourney version 1 was released in February of 2022. In 1 year, well, that's not even 1 year. So it's probably what, a year and a half. We're at version 5.2. This is the same prompt that we see on the screen. So the same prompt, which is architectural rendering, my Zoom stuff is in the way, of a blobby something something. The same prompt with V1 would look like this. As we fast forward in a short period of time to using V5, they're like photo quality, amazing, beautiful renderings. And that's a very short prompt in terms of just typing that and being able to get very quick responses. The other thing too is that we used to work, and we still can work with Photoshop and to think about collage, but here, just a comparison for me from a very important architectural collage, Mies van der Rohe's proposal from 1921. This is a photograph of a physical model that then the photograph is physically cut out and then superimposed on another image as a way to make a collage, right? And we'll see the difference today of using Photoshop and working this way. This is one of our students from Rome this past year. And the notion of collage is one that you might really understand those differences, right? Where one image is cut out and superimposed with another. The way that AI is working is at the scale of the pixel. And so it becomes impossible to really understand where these different images are being pulled from. And so much so, and hopefully we'll see it today, we're at a point where you can't discern a real photograph of something with an AI generated image. And when I scroll through my iPad and my photos on there, I have a mix because I'm constantly working with AI. There are moments where I can't tell the difference between a photo that I took and a photo that I created with Midjourney, right? So when it comes to like larger things around elections and social media and other types of things, like you really can't trust an image anymore. And I say trust an image with an idea that it represents a physical reality of something. These things have become completely enmeshed now. The other thing in terms of the process, the design process historically has been one where we start at a very conceptual stage with, say, like a napkin sketch or a diagram of something. And over the process of a semester, over the process of the design process, you end up with something that's much more kind of finalized, right? And much more specific. Right now with Midjourney, when we type in a couple of words, we get that thing that looks like a finished building already. And so this will also create maybe some tensions between the way that we teach people about design. It will certainly create some tension between, as an architect, for like a client who sees a finished image right away without us having done any design work related to that. And so these are going to be things that are going to force some changes for us. Earlier in the semester, we had Matthias here talking about his work and talking about AI. And so he goes into more depth in terms of how it works from a computational perspective. And so if you want more information, check out the LTU COAD YouTube page. And that's a great lecture. But here's kind of where we're at, right? That all of these technologies are pretty amazing, but they're just becoming part of the way that we work. And I'll show you in Photoshop, it's getting to the point where AI is just embedded. You're not making a conscious decision to use it or not use it. It's just part of the fabric of the way that we work. So here's an example. I was going to show one example. This was something that we did this past summer. And I don't know how many in the room have used ChatGPT before. Okay, so like half of you. There's certainly a sense like, okay, you can ask ChatGPT a question, you can do other types of things. I wanted to show this example just as a way to highlight the iterative nature of something. And again, that's my big takeaway for today, is that you don't do something once and you don't have to just accept what you get with AI, because it's so quick and so easy to reproduce it and to test it and to try something again. So here's one example of doing this. Let's start a new ChatGPT. And the example that we did this summer was that there were 6 questions, right? I found a YouTube video of a writer talking about like 6 questions you need to be able to answer to write a good story. And so it led to, like, rather than, hey, write me a story, you can have ChatGPT ask you questions related to things. So ask me 3 questions to help me write a short story. So who's the main character? What's their most defining characteristic or flaw? And I was not so specific in terms of like how long the story is, but we can change that. What's the central conflict? So let's say 1, who's the main character? So our main character is a designer in the future looking for things. 2, what's the central conflict or problem? She wants to change the world. How about that? And 3, where does the story take place? Three more questions, right? And so it'll ask a few questions, and I just want to answer them very quickly so that we can get to a point, because we can also continue to refine the story. And then I was thinking maybe we use the story as a way to also prompt some of the things that we do with the other tools. She likes robots. Now we know we're talking about Sarah, who's not here because she's in a faculty meeting. More questions. So at this point, if we want to write a 100-word story, it might be easier just to write 100 words than to answer 9 questions for something. Um, so, and then here's a moment. So that's, I assume 100 words. I won't check it. Revise the story to be 250 words. And then the example that I showed as well was, and without reading any of these, let's say revise the story to be more optimistic. So this is all just to say, like, or to give one example where rather than just, in a very lazy, we had someone lecture recently is like, lazy people will also do lazy AI, which will result in lazy output. And to say that for those who maybe haven't used ChatGPT before, just getting the first response is not something that you necessarily have to accept, right? You can say, revise it, make it shorter, make it longer, make it darker, make it more optimistic, make it this, and continue to add adjectives and continue to work this way in an iterative way to start to refine things. Yeah. Great question. So for those that are online, the question is like, this seemed like a lot of work, right? The way that I tend to use these tools is as a quick initial response. So yes, I had to answer 9 questions. You could also start to state some of those things. But what I like is the very quick response. And so for maybe 100 words, it may not be worth doing something. For something that's 1,000 words where you need more information and more detail, it could be worth it. The other thing that I like though is that for me as a designer and as a writer, writing the first bit is very difficult, right? Like overcoming the power of the blank page. So this gives me something that I can respond to and that I can start to edit, I can start to revise, and I can start to do other things. And so just like that prompt, like I can answer a couple questions, a couple of key questions, like easily and quickly without having to think of the whole story. Now what this has done is just start to pull all of that together and put it there. And so for me, it's that kind of initial stage of making something. And so as it relates to maybe Midjourney, as it relates to ChatGPT, is that using it more like a very quick sketch to then be able to do something. If I were to use it as an architect, there might be certain qualities that I like in an image, and then I have to start to model those and start to design those and start to think about the context of them. So I think these tools are really good as that kind of early initial stage to jumpstart something, which is also a strange thing to say because a lot of arguments are that, well, as humans, we're the creative beings, and but to be able to use this almost like a collaborator, almost as someone like, oh, if I wanted to do, like, help me think about this topic, oh, and then it expands it, okay, let's revise that, let's think about it, let's do it. When it comes to ChatGPT as well, one of the things that I've been saying is that the keyboard has been around for a long time, and it's actually a very slow, I guess if you type like this it's even slower, but it's a very slow way to enter words into the computer. We have some voice recognition, but we can also like I have a pretty extreme view of using AI related to these things in that it's just typing. It's another way of me offering a few constraints, offering a few criteria, a few adjectives, and then typing something. And so when it comes to like this notion of like, oh, is AI cheating in the classroom? It's like if you're using this tool, you're in control of the tool and you're crafting the thing and you're revising these things and you're working on it that way. Right. And so we can continue to think about using this kind of text. I think I'm getting ready to the point where I feel like I need to start paying for ChatGPT 4. And one thing that I was thinking was, especially for all of you, is like for creating a portfolio, the thing that I haven't done, but I think will be possible soon, is to give ChatGPT an image and ask it to describe it. And so within your portfolio, you can use it. You can also enter in text that you've written and have it work through. So like you use spell check, like you use Grammarly. It's another version of being able to like take my text and expand it, revise it, do something else too. And so there's a way of what I'm kind of positioning is working with text and narrative in the same way that we might work with buildings and images and renderings and other types of things. And then when those two things come together, that can also start to do some pretty interesting things. So here's ChatGPT. Here's a story. I might even just, I'll come back to this in a little bit and we'll look at that. Maybe we'll use some of those prompts. I was really amazed though this summer, and ChatGPT's changed in a way that that it asked me these questions this past summer individually. So it would ask one, I would answer it, then it would ask another. And what was amazing, you can see on the top the questions that I told it to ask. Who is it about? What do they want? Why can't they get it? By the third question, ChatGPT was asking me better questions than I had given it, right? So when it came time to do this, who's the story about? Okay, I answer that. And then in the previous thing, I say that the person's name is Jack. What does Jack want? Right. So it's already like prompting you and getting more specific. The third question, why can't Jack get job security despite his skills and dedication? Right. So the questions that it's asking, we've also talked about it potentially using some of these tools, or some of these tools are being used for focus groups as products are being developed. So when you can't get access to actual humans, you can source a whole bunch of data and say, okay, what's your motivation for buying this type of product? What would you use it for? How do you understand it? And so you could almost, for an architecture project, you may not have a client. You could start to build a persona through ChatGPT and ask chat questions to it in terms of helping you think about what the project should be. So we can come back to ChatGPT in a second. And so there is one question online about paying for some of these tools. ChatGPT 3.5 is free. ChatGPT is 4 and has added capability. For LTU students, the next thing that I'll show is Photoshop. Photoshop beta is available to all of you. Any of the Adobe things are. And so when you used Firefly, that was another option. So that's free. And then Midjourney is a monthly subscription. I think there may be a free version, but it goes by very, very quickly. So let's see. Here's an example first with Photoshop that I pre-recorded. When you have an image that is maybe a different proportion than you want, or there's something in an image that you want, the incredible thing for me was just being able to take a square image and turn it into 16 by 9. The AI automatically filling in the background as you expand it. But also if most people in the room architects or, yep, anybody not an architect? What graphic? And so if you're, for a majority of people in the room, say you do a rendering and then you want to start to add people, you want to add other types of things with it, this incredible tool. For graphic design, I realized yesterday when I was working in Illustrator, they have a tool that I haven't used, but it just kind of blew my mind. As you're working in Illustrator, it's flat, right? You have a flat graphic. It allows you, the image that they show is you take a photograph of a box and it takes that and wraps it onto the box. So it takes the flat image and allows you to put your graphic three-dimensionally onto something because it understands the perspective. I was like, oh my God, this is like, these tools are starting to be really amazing related to this. So I can show, why don't we look at Photoshop and we can see some of, looks like I closed Photoshop. So all of you have access to Photoshop beta. It's just not even beta anymore. Yeah. Okay. So I guess I may be out of date now related to this. Let's look at, so having some images here, it's literally as easy as using the crop tool and extending beyond what we see. And the other aspect to this, so if I just press enter, you can see, at least in beta, I think in the new Photoshop, there's now a new prompt that ends up underneath here. I don't even want to prompt anything. I'm just going to press enter. And it will just create its own prompt. What? So by using the crop tool, pressing enter, we can take this, what was this square image, and make it bigger. Go ahead. Yeah. It shows up automatically in here, and I'll keep doing it. And what that prompt tool is, this thing that's down at the bottom, and we can change a couple of things. The way that it's working as well. Yep. And so with a lot of these tools, like Midjourney gives us 4 options of something. Photoshop gives us 3 options for something. So now what I'm doing is just this left and right arrow allows me to scroll through and see a couple of different options here. So I can say, okay, that one's good. What I tend to also do then is just flatten this to kind of accept that and bake it in. And here's a different example. Like, let's say I'm just going to select a region, and then now where it's generative fill down here, I'm just going to say, how about a group of scientists in hazmat suits, and then press enter. So what it'll do is give us 3 options. Sometimes they may be good. Sometimes the first one is amazing. Sometimes they're terrible. And like, that's pretty good. The old model is you would have to find you would Google search, find images, take them into Photoshop, cut them out, and then paste them in. We can scroll through these. Okay, if we want that one, if we want to look at more, we can regenerate it, and it'll give us 3 more options. And so this is the thing with AI, it's inexpensive computationally to generate new options. And so it's sometimes useful, just like, I like that first one, but let me just see another 3, right? It takes a couple of seconds. Now we have 3 more. So we can scroll through these, see if there's one that we like, and then we can accept that. And I'll flatten this again, which just turns it back to another image. And we can work with that. So there's other options within here in terms of being able to work with these things, but in a very simple way of, say, working with a rendering or working with an image, or being able to rework some of those things. I was also touching up some images the other day. And so let's say you just want to remove something that you don't like. Like, maybe I don't want that hole or that window here on the side. And normally when I just do this without saying anything and say generative or generate fill without a prompt, one of the options is usually getting rid of that thing. So you have someone in a photo and you don't want people in your photo. This is so there's the first option, and it just removed that hole with 3 different versions of that. So one, in terms of your your effort in terms of the amount of time it used to take to fix something like that. For the most part, Photoshop now is with the generative fill tool that's just kind of always hovering around here. We can quickly clean up some images, right, without even having to say anything. Right? And then that just went away. Right? If we want to actually add something, what I might do is just flatten this down, accept those things. How about I get rid of this other bench that's here? And then we could add something in the foreground if we wanted. This is also the difficult thing. It's like when the blinking prompt is like, what do we want to see here? Give me some options. Gladiators. And the other thing with these tools is think about even just doing a Google search for an image. And so this is a good example. Like I'm sure there are thousands of examples of Roman gladiators that we can find, right? Black and white. It's working with the background. It's doing other things. We can generate more. But if you were to type something very, very specific that there may not be, like if you've ever typed something and there's not Google images that result in that, the same thing is true with this. It's sourcing from a database, it's sourcing from all of those images. And so sometimes you might need to change the way that you're describing it. This one's pretty nice, even just like also picking up on the shadows within the space, other types of things, right? So there you have that option now as in terms of beginning to collage, beginning to work, beginning to build something up as it relates to all of these things. And certainly cleaning up images and just fixing things or recropping them. It's an amazing, amazing tool for that. So that's baked in. That's a tool that all of you have for free now as LTU students. A couple of other examples related to this. This was from a course that we ran in Rome last spring break. And we asked the students, these are architecture and design students with no background in AI after 1 week of being in Rome. And what's really nice is being able to take a photograph, and I'll show you this with Midjourney, take a photograph and be able to blend that with other photographs. And so these students started to build these kind of imaginary spaces in Rome based on things that they were actually seeing. So the Trevi Fountain here, but the water's overflowing onto the street. This is the Baths of Caracalla where we visited, and then the student turned that into a spa at night, right? And so this ability to kind of think about these things, but based in reality, based on your own photos. And when we went in 2022, we were drawing with a sketchbook in an analog way, which we see on the left. And then last year, just the kind of vividness and the quality of the space, the material, the light. This is a student, these are like students at exactly the same point in exactly the same space, 1 year apart, pre-AI on the left and AI on the right. And being able to tell a story through here talking about a fictional ritual where people bring their furniture from their apartments out into the square to screen movies, right? And it's one thing to draw that. It's another thing to kind of show that quality in the evening, screening the movie and other types of things. We ran a seminar this summer as well, looking at the future of labor and the future of work. And so similar thing, students working with Midjourney, trying to tell a story with storyboards, looking at some of these things. This was one assignment where we asked the students to analyze a movie. This student had a Wes Anderson movie, if you couldn't tell. right? And so in the style of Wes Anderson, looking at one, what's happening, how do you tell a story with a character, how do you use the camera related to these things, but also just the style, the colors, other types of things. In talking with interior design students recently, the idea of a mood board was one that like shouldn't be collages anymore, that you could begin to construct a mood board with adjectives, with certain qualities, with other types of things with Midjourney. Another student story, and then this was a graphic design student looking at the future of kind of artificial humans or building bodies and what that might look like. And so that opportunity to just begin to tell a story, describe certain qualities for this, and then develop images. And the other thing that's going to happen is that you're going to develop. I'm at the point now where I just recently passed, since I've been using Midjourney, I have created over 30,000 images, which is like unfathomable, right? And so what you're going to be doing is you're going to produce a lot of images quickly. Then you have to select which are the best and most appropriate images for the way that you want to use them. And so it's going to change the way, this is back to that aspect of thinking about design where if you're working in an analog way, you may, like, let's say you have a meeting with your instructor and they give you feedback and you go away and you come back 4 days later and you have 2 or 3 options to show because it took you time and it took the labor to make that thing. Now you're going to go away and you can come back with 200 images of something. And then what's on you is starting to discern which of those images is most appropriate, which one gets at those types of qualities that you want to be talking about for the project that you're working on. And so it changes your role as a designer from one that's constructing that thing to one that begins to curate those things. You have to organize that work, you have to think about that work, and you have to be critical of the images that you produce. So we can come back to this in a second, but what I can do is open Midjourney. And so for those that haven't used it before, and what makes it difficult to do in a setting like this is that Midjourney lives currently, at least, lives within Discord. And so what you'll do is you'll set up, you have to download and install Discord, then you have to get a subscription to Midjourney. Once you do, you interact with Midjourney through the chat and through the prompts. So not unlike what we saw with ChatGPT, and maybe not unlike what we saw with giving a prompt to Photoshop. So here's some examples, and maybe if I just go back to what we got from ChatGPT as a starting point. If I grab a paragraph that I haven't even read, and a starting point is to say, imagine. And so there's a couple of prompts. There's 2, 3, maybe 3 ways that you can initiate something. One is with imagine. And so you just type /imagine, and then it's looking for the prompt. Another is that you can blend 2 to 10 images. And then the third command that you can use is describe. And so I'll start with imagine. So I just type I can see this, now I get a prompt. Let me paste in. This is like the 3rd time that this has happened today. Okay, so here's not even a prompt, it's just a sentence or 2, but we can press enter and we'll see what we get. So the thing that happens is we can see it's waiting to start. What'll happen in a second or 2 is that we should start to see 4 images starting to form. And so Midjourney currently works with 4 images, and it always gives you 4 options. They've surveyed to see if people want 9 or more. What's pretty interesting with 4 is that it's enough that you can look at quickly, you can kind of see similarities and differences, and then you can look for some variations of those. So 93%, it'll finish in a second. So now once it finishes, we can see it at a larger scale. This is a kind of fictional city that we just highlighted or just talked about. Underneath, we have a couple of other options now. So U is to upscale, V is to create a variation, and then it works just this is 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if we look at, let's say we want to look at number 3, because we like there's some people in the foreground, we can upscale 3. And as we do that, it just takes the same prompt, and what it'll do is the resolution, so it's pretty quick. This is version number 3. We have a couple of other options if we go back here. Maybe we like number 1. We like the bridges that are over the top, but it's not exactly what we want. So we can get 4 more versions that are based on square number 1. We could tweak the prompt now, but I'm not going to. So now this creates another one, which will give us 4 versions based on number 1 that we can look at to decide if we want to upscale or do something with. And this is why when I say that it's inexpensive, like in terms of your labor, in terms of your time, to look at more variations and to look at more options of these things, I tend to like, if I get 4 really great images at the beginning, I'll upscale all 4. I'll get variations of all 4. I'll rerun it again just to see if there's something else that comes out of that. So let's go back. So what we did is we said, let's upscale number 1, or sorry, let's make variations of number 1. Now here's 4 variations of number 1 at the bottom. Ideally, one of these is better than one of the previous versions. So now we could upscale one of these. The other thing that we can do is that the way that the tool is working is that it's starting with a kind of random set of values. And so the whatever this is, the kind of swirling button on the right, just is another way to initiate that same prompt, but with a different random starting point. And so when we do that, we submit, we should get 4 more of those. So we just upscaled this one. This is our same prompt, but it's going to give us 4 more variations, right? And so as you start to get a sense for this, it's not hard to imagine how you could get to producing 1,000 images, 10,000 images really quickly. And so these are 4 new images for something. If I save one of these, and I tend not to work on my iPad, or I tend not to work on my laptop. I tend to work on my iPad with this tool, which is another nice thing. Us taking Midjourney and taking students to Rome also meant that you can also do this on your phone. So a student could take an image when we were standing at a spot in Rome and then tweak that image right on their phone with Midjourney. So the other thing that I mentioned was describe. And so we've done imagine as a way of starting something. There's also a tool, describe. So if we take an image, and I'll just use the image that I saved a second ago and put that in. Okay. So you can give Midjourney an image and ask it to describe that image. And I think this is less the description, say from ChatGPT in terms of describing an image. It's giving you a prompt that might produce an image like that. And so this is a great way as you're starting out to take an image or find an image somewhere, screenshot an image from Instagram, whatever it might be, wherever you get them. And then here are 4 options for a prompt that you could put into Imagine to produce a similar image. And the thing is that it's never going to produce exactly that same image. So we can choose prompt 1, 2, 3, or 4. we can rerun it and it'll give us 4 more descriptions, but we can also say, imagine all, and this is going to give us all 4 of those prompts as output here, right? And so there's a way that you're really beginning to automate the way that you might work with this process. It's also nice. I have found some prompts that I continue to use over and over again, having done this, right? Not the whole prompt, but it might be thinking about ways that you might describe a camera angle, a drone shot, an establishing shot, a macro shot. So you can describe the camera, you can describe lighting in different ways, you can describe materials in different ways. And so with these, now we have four sets of images, each with 4. So we just produced 16 images. And we can see that some of these, we can see the amount of trees, we can see the landscaping, the city, the type of view that we're looking at, all of that type of stuff that's there, right? So that's one way, especially when you're starting out. How might I prompt this? How might I deal with some of these things? There are other suffixes that you can add to prompts in different ways in terms of controlling how powerful the AI is related to it and other types of things. But we can set these, I'll show you if you get into this, /settings gives you a bunch of different options for settings, which for me is setting the style at 50 and the style to raw. I have to press enter. And so we can see just a set of things that happen here. But we were talking earlier before this started, one way that I tend to work is with blending images. And so that's the other way that I would suggest working. And I don't have too many, let's see. So these are already AI images, but let's say here's a bunch of shipping containers as one image. And let's find another image. So if I take these 2 images and press enter, what you get are 4 versions of trying to put these 2 images together. And they're not a collage. They're more like the essence of the image mixed with the essence of another image. And so we'll see what we get as we do this. And I've been doing things. I went to the museum this weekend and started looking at some very abstract paintings and started sampling those in relationship to other things. That started producing some pretty amazing outcomes. I have a whole set of like historic, iconic construction photos that I'm continuing to source from archives and blending those with other types of images. So here, now we can see a kind of mix between that freestanding building and the shipping containers. If we want to see them, we can click here, shipping containers. And then that other building, right? So this becomes a mix of all of them. If I want to try it again, I can rerun all of them. If I want to upscale one of these, let's say number 4, I can do that. And then I'll show you another part just of talking about the kind of iterative process of doing these things is that I can, so in this process, I started with 2 images, put them together. I can very subtle, and I can now add a prompt here. And so let's continue our theme of Roman gladiators. It's not like Photoshop, it's not gonna put Roman gladiators in there, but maybe let's see what it does. And I can show you there's also a way I have some preferences set of some preloaded prompts that I've continued to work with over time. And so I can vary this again. And so one of my prompts is from the stone quarry, which is an abandoned limestone quarry overrun by nature, dark and ominous. And so now I've got this preference set as a kind of shortcut. So when I put this in, what should happen is that I'll get these 4 images, but they'll have things growing on them, right? I have another one. See if it lets me do it right away. I have another one called Detroit. And once it runs, you can see what the actual prompt is, and I'll do it once more. And I think I have one that's called bio. And so just from that one image, right, as a starting point, I can add a prompt and I can kind of skew the quality that results from that. So this is Roman gladiator. So we do actually have some gladiators in there. This one is Detroit, future of urban mobility, EV, and autonomous. So it gives this a really different set of qualities. This one is the bio. My shorthand bio is industrial robotics, biotech experiment, translucent silicone, and circuitry. Gives them a different quality, right? So we could upscale, decide to take one of these and upscale it. And then what was the other one? Here's abandoned limestone quarry and other things that are happening. Why don't I also take one of those? And so what we're really doing at a high level is moving away from us as designers having to change the color of individual pixels, using a paintbrush, using the clone tool, doing other types of things, where we can start to also, with this, we could also vary a region. And so this should open a window. Crash. Uh-oh. So what you can do with vary region, if it's not working now or it's another window, is to select a whole portion of the image and prompt something within that. Not sure why it stopped working. But maybe that's a good stopping point. But again, it's just that way of being able to work between these things, give it a kind of short prompt, be able to modify an image, select image, curate images, upscale image, blend images together as a way to get somewhere, which maybe, I don't know, I'm thinking about your first question, like it still seems like a lot of work, but it's different type of work. And I think if you look at the difference between, and in the end, it's just currently an image. There's talk about V6 of being able to do animations and video, or possibly also getting 3-dimensional data out of the AI. But currently, if you were to create a rendering, you'd have to model something or Photoshop something, collage all of these things. And so these tools do considerably speed up that process. And the quality is incredibly high right now as well. So how about any questions? How does it go ahead. I do. Because I also look at like how much you spend for coffee in a week or other types of things. Like it's easy to justify. I think it's $30 a month. But that being less about the cost of it, I think it also depends maybe what classes you're in, what you're doing. But if you have design related courses, that ability to be able to produce images and inspiration and other types of things along the way, I think are really valuable. I also think that, I mean, just from this short demonstration today, we talked about ChatGPT, Photoshop, and Midjourney. A year ago, these tools didn't exist. A year from now, it may not be Midjourney. It may not be Firefly. It may not be these types of things. But you learning how to think this way and how to design with these tools now is absolutely valuable. And so it may be a Midjourney subscription for a year, and then to realize in a year from now you're going to switch to another platform or do something else or work that way. But even at a kind of very, very large scale, for me, the way that I think about as designers and the way that we work, we're often like, as an architect, we design something, then we put together drawings. Those drawings are all in service of explaining to someone else or a whole team of other people what to build. For graphic designers, there's specifications, there's brand guidelines. Those are in service of communicating to a client or someone else how that thing gets used. The tool of having to prompt something now to learn how to speak to the AI is a really valuable thing, that you have to begin to articulate your language as a designer. You have to articulate what you're trying to accomplish and your vision and your goals as a designer. And so the more you do that, as whether that's with AI, whether that's with a client, whether that's with your boss in your job, whether that's with a colleague that you're collaborating with, that, like, designers being able to communicate those things are really, really important. And so I would advocate, like, beginning to work with these tools, especially for many of you that are first year, like, it's going to set you up really. And I think even in the last year of seeing how quickly these tools have kind of come into all the other things, right? We've had Photoshop for a long time. Now it's like AI is just always present in Photoshop. And so working with them now is going to be better. So Midjourney, maybe, maybe not. Like, I think some of you have used Firefly. Maybe that accomplishes some of those tasks in the short term. Photoshop, it's already there and you can work with it. And so you can see. I think some of that is coming. Like, certainly the zoom, being able to zoom in and out is a relatively new function. Being able to pan is a new function. But I think there's other tools like Runway, which allows you to give it an image and it animates it. And so I think we're not far away from being able to shift some of those things. But that being said, I I think that these tools, if you know exactly what you want, sometimes these tools can be super frustrating because they won't give you exactly what you want. But if you don't know what you want and you want to be able to source a whole bunch of different things and think about qualities and do certain things, that's why I think it's productive to think about these things a little bit like an early sketch. And so, but the sketch is all of a sudden like photorealistic and has other properties with it, but it's opens up the possibilities for what you're doing. And that's why I think it's useful at an early stage of the design process. You don't have to make an image at a late stage in a design process because you already know what that is, right? And it's all set. And so it could be very frustrating. Like, this is the image I want, but I just want it a little bit moved over, a little bit shifted. Sometimes that can be like, the AI won't cooperate. Or even today, it was like, ask me 3 questions, and we're at like question 9, and it's still asking me questions. And I was like, no, I just write the damn story already. Like, let's get on with it. And so, but I think if you're at a stage where you're looking at multiple options and considering all sorts of things, it's a really useful tool for that. And the reality is that most of the design that we do in school tends to be that early stage design. In professional practice, like 60-80% of our time is executing on the thing that we already kind of know what it is, but we spend all of our time describing that or doing the drawings and other types of things that way. But for a lot of the stuff that you do in school, that early exploration, these are great tools to be able to play with that. Any other questions? You guys?
With regard to ChatGPT and text generation, I've heard about some new citation guidelines that are starting to take shape. Is that something, do you have any go-to sources for that, or?
No sources for specific. I actually think, because we did something this summer, MLS and like Chicago style of guidelines or whatever those things are called, I think actually have sample now for ChatGPT within there. And that's why I think, like, to dispel this idea, last year students were told in a history class not to use ChatGPT, and they did, and then they created some problems. That assignment or that project's been absolutely changed. Now the new assignment is the instructors ask ChatGPT the question, and the students have to verify the response to that. Are you dealing with that now?
A lot harder.
It's tough. Yeah. And that's the change, at least when it comes to, say, something like ChatGPT. And now there's even a little thing at the bottom that says, for facts, figures, specific things, like, don't use this, because it will make things up to try and satisfy you. And so instead, what all of your jobs are going to be is validating what you get from an AI, which is exactly why the history team changed that assignment. Is like, we already did your job of asking ChatGPT. Now you figure out which of these is the right answer, because it gave us 3 wrong answers and 1 slightly right answer, right? Or something like that. And so I think these things are evolving, but I have a different sense too, because at least when it comes to text, it's a very specific thing about citing where something comes from. We've never asked a design student to cite what software they used, right? We just don't. We expect you to kind of move through a bunch of different softwares, and like that idea that, oh, you have to, it's okay to use AI as long as you say you use AI. When it comes to design related things, I think the tools are going to be so completely enmeshed in everything. And even now with Photoshop, if you use Photoshop, do you have to disclose that you used AI or not? Like, right, right.
No.
Not that you used AI, but like, how did you use it? Yeah. And what were those prompts? And are there better prompts? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I think that, and that's a great point to kind of end on as a way to, again, like, bring all these things back to it, is like being able to describe the things and interrogate it and question them and make multiple iterations, right? So don't just make one simple prompt and take that as the image. Try it, rerun the prompt, change the prompt slightly, change the order of the words slightly, work that way. And then I think you're starting to have a kind of discursive engagement with the tool, with your instructor, about why you're doing the things that you're doing. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do in school, is to, like, talk about why you're working the way that you are and help to guide you in different ways. Okay? Tell your friends that they should also watch this video. I think these tools should be used much more than they're currently being used. I'm super happy that was it. Oh, you guys did it for Intro to Design, right? That all freshmen had an assignment with this. And I think, again, the first year class are the early adopters. All 150 of you using this tool is different than, like, the seniors who maybe haven't used this tool at all yet. And so you're going to be teaching us as we go forward related to all of these things. Okay. All right. And if you work with this stuff and you have some great outcomes, share them with me. If you're frustrated and you can't figure something out, come find me, and I'm happy to help you work through some of it. Okay. There's probably still some pizza left too, if you guys want to get some to go. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.